The room smelled of stale smoke and dust, as if it had been waiting for decades to breathe again. FBI agent Lucas Warren pushed open the door to room 6 of the Desert Palms Motel, his flashlight slicing through the gloom. The wallpaper, once floral, was now a sickly shade of yellow, peeling like fragile skin. Beneath the old carpet, a single creak echoed, unnerving, deliberate, as if the room itself remembered. Then he saw it, a faded photograph of a young couple, half buried under the rotted floorboard, their faces frozen in time, smiling before they vanished forever. Before we dive deeper into this chilling story on missing shadows, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. October 13, 1984. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly under a burnt orange sky, its silence broken only by the hum of an old Chevy Nova. Inside, Claire Delaney tapped the steering wheel in rhythm with a soft country tune playing on the radio. Beside him, Claire leaned her head against the window, her auburn hair catching the last glow of the setting sun. They had been married for 2 years, 2 years of dreams, small-town arguments, and promises whispered under starry nights. They weren't supposed to be here. Their trip to Phoenix had been last minute, an attempt to escape the tension that had quietly crept into their lives. Claire, a bright-eyed teacher, had been feeling distant lately, lost in thoughts she didn't share. Ethan, a mechanic known for his quiet strength, wanted to fix everything, but some cracks ran too deep to be seen. When the glowing neon sign of Desert Palms Motel appeared on the roadside, they decided to stop for the night. The motel looked tired, its paint chipped and windows clouded, but it was the only place for miles. Room 6 smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke, the kind of scent that lingers long after the guests have gone. They checked in at 7:23 p.m. No one would ever see them again. The night fell hard over the Arizona desert, bringing with it a silence so thick it seemed to press against the motel walls. Room 6 was dimly lit, a single bedside lamp casting long shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, brushing her hair, while Ethan rummaged through his duffel bag, looking for the pack of cigarettes he swore he hadn't forgotten. "I'm not sure I like this place," Claire said, her voice soft but uneasy. "The guy at the front desk. Did you see how he looked at us?" Ethan glanced up, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Babe, this isn't exactly the Ritz. He's probably just bored out of his mind." But deep down, even Ethan felt something off about the motel. When they'd walked into the lobby, the clerk, a gaunt man with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes, barely spoke a word. His name tag read Carl, but something about him felt detached, as if he wasn't fully there. Later that night, as they lay in bed, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Claire stirred. "Ethan, did you hear that?" He propped himself on one elbow, listening. The steps stopped just outside their door. The thin metal handle of the motel lock rattled. Once, then again, as if someone was testing it. Ethan slid out of bed and crept to the door, his heart pounding. "Hello," he called out, trying to sound firm. No answer. When he peeked through the window, he saw nothing but the cracked pavement and a flickering neon sign outside. But just as he turned to go back to bed, he caught something in the corner of his eye, a figure standing under the farthest light post, barely visible, watching. The uneasy silence in room 6 felt heavier after that moment at the window. Ethan closed the curtain and forced a laugh to ease the tension. "Probably just another guest," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Claire wasn't convinced either. She kept glancing at the door, as if expecting someone to knock, or worse. "Ethan, I don't like this place," she whispered. "Something's wrong here. Let's just leave." "It's late," he said, trying to calm her. "We'll head out at first light. Just try to get some sleep." They both lay down, but neither of them could. The desert wind howled softly outside, rattling the window frame. Around midnight, Claire heard it again. Footsteps, this time closer, heavier. She sat up, clutching the blanket. "Ethan," she whispered. He was already awake, staring at the door. "I hear it," he muttered. Then came the sound of metal dragging against metal, like a key ring being fumbled. The doorknob shook. For a split second, it felt like the thin wooden door might give way. Ethan jumped out of bed, his adrenaline surging. He reached for the motel phone on the nightstand. No dial tone. Stay here, he said, grabbing the flashlight from his bag. Claire clutched his arm. Please don't open that door. But Ethan wasn't going to wait for whoever was outside. He swung the door open, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. The corridor was empty, quiet, too quiet. But just as he stepped outside, he caught the faint smell of smoke, like someone had recently been there. He scanned the parking lot. The figure under the distant light post was gone. Inside, Claire tried calling the front desk from her own phone, but there was no signal. The old motel's thick concrete walls seemed to swallow the reception. Her chest tightened as a soft creak came from the corner of the room. The closet door was slightly ajar. "Ethan," she called out, panic rising. He rushed back inside, finding her pointing to the closet. With slow, cautious steps, he opened it, empty, except for an old, torn motel uniform hanging inside, covered in dust. The name tag read Carl, the same name as the man at the front desk. But the fabric looked decades old. "Something's not right here," Ethan whispered. "We need to go. Now." As they grabbed their bags, the hallway lights flickered. A deep hum filled the air, like an old generator struggling to breathe. Then came a sound that made Claire's blood run cold. A door slamming somewhere down the corridor, followed by hurried footsteps moving fast, straight toward them. Ethan's hand tightened on Claire's as they hurried out of room 6. The hallway felt narrower now, as if the very walls were closing in. The humming sound from the old generator echoed through the motel, growing louder, almost like a low, vibrating growl. "Keep moving," Ethan whispered. "We'll get to the car and leave now." Claire clutched her bag to her chest. Every step down that hallway felt like walking into a nightmare. The cracked, yellowed tiles beneath their feet groaned as if something heavy had walked there before them. A faint whiff of gasoline lingered in the air, mixing with the metallic tang of rust. As they reached the lobby, they noticed the front desk was empty. The bell sat there, gathering dust, and the key hooks behind the counter were covered in a layer of grime. Claire froze, pointing. "Finn, look at the logbook." The open ledger on the counter was old, its pages yellowed and brittle. Ethan flipped it toward them. The date on the last entry wasn't October 1984, it was August 1979. The names of previous guests were scrawled in fading ink, but there was something eerie. Every name for the past 5 years had been crossed out in red. Before they could process it, the sound of a door creaking open came from behind them. Claire turned just in time to see the shadow of a tall figure at the end of the hallway they'd just left. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. "Let's go," Ethan urged, grabbing her hand. They rushed outside, the cold desert night wrapping around them. The parking lot was empty. Their car, which had been parked right by the neon sign, was gone. "What? No, this isn't happening," Claire muttered, her voice breaking. "Stay calm. Maybe I parked." Ethan's words died as he looked around. The lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds, as if no car had parked there in years. The neon motel sign flickered, the light spelling Desert Palms 1 second, then Desert Palms the next as letters faded out. A sudden noise, a dragging, metallic scrape, made them spin around. The tall figure was outside now, standing under the neon sign, his face hidden by the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, trying to sound braver than he felt. No response. The figure tilted his head as if studying them. Then, slowly, he raised an old-fashioned motel key, dangling it between 2 fingers. The metal glinted under the flickering light. "Out," Claire whispered, grabbing his arm. But Ethan stepped forward, his voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" The figure took 1 step closer, and the humming sound grew louder, vibrating through the cracked asphalt. The air felt heavier, thicker. Claire could barely breathe. Suddenly, every motel light went out. They were swallowed by complete darkness. Claire screamed as she felt a cold hand brush past her shoulder. Ethan shouted her name, reaching out, but there was nothing. No Claire. No voice. Just silence. When the lights came back on seconds later, Ethan was gone too. Room 6 stood open, curtains swaying softly, as if breathing. December 12, 2023. The sun was setting over the Arizona desert, casting long shadows over the crumbling remains of the Desert Palms Motel. The building had been abandoned for decades, swallowed by dust and time. Most people driving past it never looked twice. It was just another forgotten relic of the 1980s. But for FBI agent Lucas Warren, this place was a wound that had never healed. Lucas had been a rookie cop in 1984 when Ethan and Claire Delaney vanished. He remembered the frantic search, the interviews with motel staff, the desperate calls from the couple's families. Back then, Desert Palms was alive, an aging but functioning roadside motel. Now, it was nothing but broken glass, graffiti, and the unsettling feeling that the walls still held secrets. The FBI had reopened the case after a retired motel housekeeper, an elderly woman named Agnes Whitlock, came forward. Her voice trembled as she recalled something she had never told police. "That night, I saw the clerk, Carl, arguing with someone in room 6. I heard a scream, then silence. When I asked Carl the next morning, he told me no one had checked into room 6. But I saw them. I saw the young couple." Lucas, now grayer and tougher after 30 years of service, wasn't easily shaken. But something about Agnes's testimony chilled him. Carl, the clerk, had died in 1995, leaving behind only cryptic notes and a motel ledger with pages missing. With a flashlight in hand, Lucas stepped into room 6 for the first time in decades. Dust clung to everything, and the air felt unnaturally cold. He crouched near the corner where the carpet had rotted away. Something shiny caught his eye. He pulled it free, a Polaroid photograph, the edges curled and stained. It showed Ethan and Claire standing in that very room, smiling, holding a set of motel keys. Behind them, barely visible in the mirror, stood a third person, a tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat, his face hidden in shadow. Lucas's throat tightened. He'd seen countless cases, but something about the photograph didn't feel right. It looked fresh, too fresh for something that had been buried under the floor for decades. For weeks, Lucas and his team combed through the ruins. They found old cigarette butts, scraps of torn paper, and rusted keys, but one discovery shook them to their core, a locked trunk buried beneath the floorboards. When they pried it open, the stench of decay filled the room. Inside were personal belongings, Claire's gold locket, Ethan's leather wallet, a motel ledger page torn neatly in half, and an old cassette tape labeled Room 6. They played the tape back at the lab. It began with the muffled sound of laughter, Ethan and Claire, by the sound of it. Then came footsteps. A male voice, low and distorted, said, "You shouldn't be here." The tape ended with a loud bang and a woman's scream. The findings made national headlines. The case of the vanished couple from 1984 was suddenly alive again, with reporters calling Room 6 the Motel of Shadows. But there was one final twist. Forensic analysis on the Polaroid revealed the film stock hadn't been manufactured until the mid-1990s, 10 years after Ethan and Claire disappeared. Had someone returned to that room and staged the photo? Or was something far darker at play? Lucas Warren knew something wasn't adding up. The motel wasn't just the scene of Ethan and Claire's disappearance. It felt like the epicenter of something far more sinister. The Polaroid photo, with its inexplicable timestamp, gnawed at him like a splinter buried under skin. Digging into archives, Lucas discovered that 5 other disappearances had occurred within a 20-mile radius of Desert Palms between 1977 and 1989, all young couples, all vanishing without a trace. Each time, the motel had been the common denominator. The deeper Lucas went, the darker the trail became. He uncovered a box of old police reports buried in the county storage room. One report, dated March 3, 1979, described an unsolved homicide at the motel, a traveling salesman found stabbed in room 6. The night clerk on duty that year? Carl Evers, the same man Agnes Whitlock had mentioned. According to witness statements, Carl had an unnerving obsession with the motel's special guests. He kept detailed notes about couples staying there, their names, car models, even their conversations overheard through the thin walls. When police had interviewed him back in 1984 after Ethan and Claire's disappearance, Carl was cooperative but eerily calm. His alibi had been weak, but no evidence tied him to the crime. One night, while going through Carl's old apartment records, Lucas stumbled across a weathered suitcase stored in evidence. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal that Carl had kept hidden. Its pages were filled with disturbing entries. Room 6 breathes when they sleep. It knows their names. The young ones always stay longer than they should. The couple with the red car, they screamed when the door closed. Lucas's hands trembled as he flipped through the entries. Near the back, he found a page labeled October 13th, 1984, the night Ethan and Claire disappeared. The words were scrawled in frantic handwriting. Two of them checked in. She smells like lilacs. He asks too many questions. I'll keep them in the room tonight. As Lucas pieced things together, a chilling theory emerged. Desert Palms wasn't just a rundown motel. It might have been a hunting ground. Carl wasn't just a clerk. He was the spider at the center of the web. But the strange part? Carl's journal entries didn't stop after his death in 1995. The final pages looked fresher, written in a different pen, but the same unsettling tone continued. The walls are hungry. They remember their screams. Someone will come looking. They always do. Forensic analysis confirmed something impossible. These last entries had been written just months ago. Lucas listened to the cassette tape again, this time with enhanced audio equipment. In the background, faintly, another sound emerged, like the rhythmic humming of a motel neon sign. But overlaid on top of that was a second voice, whispering something almost inaudible. You shouldn't have found this. The voice didn't match Carl's. It was newer. Lucas felt the motel tightening its grip on him. He returned to room 6 with a team to conduct a full sweep. That's when they discovered something horrific. Behind a false wall, there was a narrow passage leading to a hidden crawlspace. Inside, they found decayed clothing, Polaroid photos of other couples, and one final, shocking item, a human jawbone wrapped carefully in a piece of motel bedsheet. The discovery reignited national attention, but Lucas wasn't satisfied. This isn't just a cold case anymore, he told his team. Someone's been here, recently. Someone's keeping this story alive. As they sealed off the motel, Lucas stood outside under the broken neon sign. He could almost see Ethan and Claire stepping out of their Chevy Nova, smiling, unaware that they were walking into the motel's dark history. But the question that haunted him was simple. Was Carl the killer? Or was there someone, or something, still using room 6? The Desert Palms Motel stood under a cold, moonlit sky, its decaying frame groaning in the desert wind. FBI agent Lucas Warren wasn't alone this time. A forensic team, armed with ground-penetrating radar and scanning equipment, combed the property. Yet, as the hours dragged on, Lucas felt an invisible weight pressing on him, a sense that the motel wasn't just holding secrets, but resisting their discovery. Inside room 6, Lucas crouched near the false wall they'd broken open days earlier. The crawl space was darker than pitch, lined with splintered wood and rusted nails. He climbed inside, flashlight beam trembling slightly in his hand. Each footstep stirred up decades of dust, coating his throat with a bitter metallic taste. At the far end of the passage, they discovered a second chamber, sealed off by a rotting wooden door. The hinges gave way with a groan when Lucas forced it open. What lay beyond made everyone fall silent. The space wasn't large, barely big enough to fit 2 people. But it was what decorated the walls that sent chills down Lucas's spine. Polaroids, dozens of them, pinned in crooked lines. Ethan and Claire were in at least 15 of them, captured at different angles. Laughing, eating takeout, sitting on the bed. Carl, he must have taken these, murmured a tech, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucas examined one of the photos closely. It was dated October 12, 1984, one day before their disappearance. But the back of another photo made his blood run cold. It was dated October 14, 1984, one day after Ethan and Claire were last seen alive. How? Lucas muttered. In the center of the room sat an old, metal locker. With a crowbar, they forced it open. Inside were Ethan's watch, Claire's purse, and something far worse, a set of keys labeled 6. The teeth of the key were bent, as if someone had tried desperately to force it from the inside of a locked door. There was also a small leather-bound notebook, newer than the rest of the evidence. Lucas flipped through its pages, his hands trembling. She cried for hours. He fought. I told them to stop making noise. I told them they belong to room 6 now. I buried them where the desert will keep them quiet. One line at the very end stood out, written in red ink. They're not gone. Room 6 keeps everyone who stays too long. Lucas led a team outside, scanning the property behind the motel where the desert sand had drifted into uneven mounds. Dogs sniffed furiously, their handlers tense. Within an hour, they found something. A section of sand packed unusually tight, like a shallow grave. As the team began digging, Lucas stood frozen. He had worked hundreds of cold cases, but nothing could prepare him for what they uncovered. Beneath a tarp lay 2 sets of skeletal remains, wrapped together in motel sheets. A corroded wedding band still clung to one bony finger. Claire's gold locket, identified by her family years ago, rested in the dirt. Ethan Delaney and Claire Delaney, a forensic tech said softly, as if saying their names could bring them peace. Lucas thought the discovery would bring closure, but it didn't. Not when they played the cassette tape again and heard a voice whispering over the static. You found them, but you're not leaving. Everyone in the room went pale. The voice wasn't Carl's, it sounded recent. That night, Lucas stayed behind alone to finish logging evidence. As he stood in room 6, the neon sign outside flickering through the thin curtains, he heard it. A knock on the door. 3 slow taps. He froze. Hello, he called, stepping closer. The doorknob rattled. Then, in the mirror across the room, he saw it. The reflection of a tall figure in a wide-brimmed hat standing behind him. Lucas spun around. Nothing. By the next morning, Lucas had a grim conclusion. Carl might have been the killer, but the motel itself, there was something wrong with it. Something that seemed to trap echoes of its victims. Every photo, every tape, every shadow in the room felt alive, as though Ethan and Claire had never truly left. The Desert Palms Motel was finally sealed off, the FBI declaring it a crime scene unlike any other. Forensic teams worked day and night, cataloging every scrap of evidence. The remains of Ethan and Claire Delaney were officially identified through dental records, bringing long-awaited closure to their families. Yet, for Agent Lucas Warren, closure was the one thing this case refused to give. 2 weeks later, the county ordered the motel to be demolished. Lucas stood at a safe distance as heavy machinery tore through the walls of room 6. The sound of splintering wood and crumbling concrete echoed across the desert, carried by the cold winter wind. But as the wrecking ball struck the back wall, an eerie noise rose from the rubble. A deep hum, like the motel itself was groaning. The demolition crew froze, exchanging nervous glances. One of the workers swore he heard faint laughter, a man's and a woman's, carried on the wind. Get this over with, Lucas barked, though his voice wavered. Within hours, Desert Palms was reduced to rubble. Yet, when the dust settled, room 6's doorframe was still standing, burned, blackened, but perfectly upright, like a monument to something that refused to die. Back at headquarters, Lucas reviewed the evidence one last time. The Polaroid photos, the cassette tapes, the journal, they all painted a picture of Carl Evers as a man who had become obsessed, maybe even unhinged. But there was one detail Lucas couldn't shake. The fingerprints on the newer journal pages didn't match Carl's. In fact, they didn't match anyone in the FBI database. Whoever had written those final entries had been there, inside room 6, within the last 5 years. When Lucas questioned Agnes Whitlock again, her words sent chills down his spine. I told you, that room takes people. They never leave. Carl didn't start it. He just worked there long enough to notice. On his last day in Arizona, Lucas drove out to the motel's ruins one final time. The desert was silent, the wreckage scattered like bones under the pale moonlight. He walked to where room 6 had once stood, his flashlight flickering as he scanned the rubble. There, half buried in the sand, he found a Polaroid photo. His breath caught. It was new, too new. The photo showed Lucas himself, standing in room 6, looking over his shoulder. His heart pounded as he flipped it over. The date scrawled in black ink read, December 11th, 2023. He had never taken that photo. The case of Ethan and Claire Delaney was officially closed, but Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the motel's story wasn't over. He retired 6 months later, moving to a quiet cabin in Montana. Yet every night as he locked his door, he thought about that Polaroid. Sometimes, when the wind howled just right, he swore he could hear footsteps outside his cabin, 3 slow taps, like a knock on room 6's door. The Desert Palms Motel no longer exists. The land where it once stood remains fenced off, considered unstable for construction. Locals say they avoid driving near it after dark. Some claim they've seen the faint outline of a neon sign still flickering in the distance, even though the power lines were cut years ago. And once in a while, a new Polaroid shows up, tucked under car wipers, slipped into mailboxes, of strangers who have never stayed there, yet somehow appear inside room 6. If this story gave you chills, drop a comment with your thoughts below. And if you want more real-life mysteries like this, subscribe now and check out the next video waiting for you on the screen. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.